Welcome to Lesson 2 of Unit 1, your second video of the year. Students, what do we want you to be able to do? Students will be able to create a function to model a situation and use functions to answer questions. And students, that's you, right? So in your notes, I shouldn't see students, I should see I will be able to, right? You, because you're taking ownership of this. All right? So take a minute and pause the video to write this down. All right? Write your heading and your notes. All right? And we'll go from there. All right, so in this lesson, what we're really going to aim at is reading problems, pulling out the information that's important, and then coming up with an equation to represent, to model what's going on. Right? In particular, you see the money back there. We're going to be talking about revenue and profits and money, money, money. All right? So let's get moving. I would like you to think about it. All right? Suppose Bose manufactures speakers and sells them for $120 each. If the cost incurred in the production and sales of the speaker are $300,000 plus $10 for each speaker produced, how many speakers must Bose produce and sell in order to make more money than it's spent? All right, so I want you guys to think about this problem. Take a minute, write it down, right? I should see it in your notes. I should see, think about it, and then I should see the problem. And I want you to write down, whether you understand it, whether you have a plan, and can you solve and check it, all right? That's UPSC, right? UPSC. I want to see it in your notes, okay? Do you understand? All right? And if you don't understand, write that I don't understand what they're asking, all right? Can you come up with a plan? How might you go about solving this problem? All right? What is it asking? Again, do you understand the problem? And then actually put your plan into action and solve. And then check. Does your answer make sense? All right? I want to see how far you get in this problem, and make sure you write that down. I understand it. I have a plan. I've solved it. So UPSC, you don't have to write I understand. You can use U, P, S, and C for each one of the tasks that you've completed. All right? So I hope you took a minute to pause this and wrote it down and kind of tried it and took a stab at it. All right. Today we want to really focus on certain ideas and topics, and hopefully the intro slide and that problem kind of got you thinking, what am I looking for? What kind of things are we going to be dealing with today in our lesson? And the first thing we're going to talk about is revenue. Ooh. Revenue. Ooh. Revenue. And what does revenue mean? What is revenue? Do you know the definition? Revenue is the amount of money that a company brings in. All right? So it's how much money they bring in. It's how much money they've earned for the year, right? It's how much money they've earned for the year. And how do we come up with revenue? Right? Well, if I'm selling a product, right, it has a cost affixed to it. It has a price, right? So we don't just go companies can guess how much revenue they're going to have, right? They can predict how much revenue they're going to make, like Apple can predict based on previous sales how many iPhones they're going to sell when they come out with a new model, right? Or iPads, right? And they can predict their revenue, what they're looking for, by taking the cost of their item right? The product that they're trying to sell, and multiplying it by the number that they're expecting to sell, all right? So revenue, we're going to let R equal revenue, all right? So R equals revenue. And we're going to let P equal the price of the product. Okay? And we're going to let Q, let's make that a lowercase p, okay? So it's a lowercase p. We're going to let Q equal the quantity or the number of products sold, the amount of the product sold, right? So we're going to call that amount or number. It's kind of up to you. So that means our revenue, R, is going to equal our product, P, times, and we don't like to use, you're used to seeing that time symbol a lot, but we don't actually like to use that symbol because it can be confused for an X. We use a little black dot. Times Q. So revenue equals the price times the quantity, okay? But is that all that's important, the revenue to a company? How much money they bring in? Or are there other things that are kind of important, like profit, right? Profit is really what the company is interested in, long term, right? Because profit tells you what? That's how much money you've actually made, right? Let's look it up and let's find the definition, all right? If you don't know what profit is. So profit equals what? What does it equal? Look it up. So profit is the amount of money it's the amount of money a company makes after the expenses are removed from the revenue. So profit is the true earnings of the company. It's how much money they really made, right? So if I have, say I'm going to make something, what am I going to make? I'm going to make basketballs, all right? And they're going to be rubber outdoor basketballs, and there's a cost associated with making those and distributing them and delivering them to stores, right? So I have to have machines, I have to have employees, I have to have all these things to make the basketball. After the cost of paying for my employees, my machines, the electricity, all that, right? I subtract those expenses from the profits, which is, I subtract this from the revenue, right? The revenue is the amount of money generated from selling my product. And then that'll give me my profit, which is how much money I actually make. And oftentimes when companies start and businesses start, their profit is negative. That's not good, but that's kind of how we start. So let's come up with some sort of equation for profit. All right? And we're going to let capital P, and we're going to make that a little cursive, okay? A little cursive capital P. That's going to equal profit. Okay? And then we're talking about what? Revenue, right? So again, we have our revenue, which was capital R. And then we have something new, our cost of production. We call those things expenses, all right? So we have our expenses. I'm going to let that be, well, let's just stick with capitals just for fun. Okay, but usually we come up with equations. We don't, but since you're coming up with them and we're coming up with them together, it doesn't really matter. And that's going to be our expenses. So profit, P, is going to equal revenue minus expenses. And we're going to use these two ideas and these two general equations to solve our last problem, the think about it problem, okay? So let's take a look at that problem again. All right. So now let's look at it. Do we know how much each speaker sells for? Right? That's the cost of one item, of one speaker, right? So that's the individual cost. That's the unit cost, right? That's $120 each. And what else do we know? Let's see. It says, if the costs incurred in the amount of production and sale of the speaker are $300,000 plus $10 for each speakers, well, you have to come up with a variable, right? It sounds like, because we have all these dollar amounts, but nothing about how many speakers we're selling, right? So you should probably define a variable, all right, for this. And I would define my variable to be X, and I'm going to let X equal the number of speakers sold. Okay. Oh, that's really sloppy. Sorry about that, guys. Let's write that a little neater. So now you have a variable for that. Can you come up with some equations possibly, right? For revenue and then profit? I hope so. So I'm gonna let this go, or am I? So remember, revenue was what? It was the revenue is the price of the product, right? Times the number of units sold. So what's the price of the product? $120. And then how many did I sell? I sold X of them, because I don't know, right? And then you need to find what? Your expenses, right? Oh boy. In this one, I have to look at the expenses. And what are my expenses? We're going to let E equal my expenses, all right? Remember that was capital E? So my expenses here are, well, it cost $300,000 plus $10 for each speaker produced, right? So that's $300,000. That's your initial startup cost, right? And then after your startup cost, you're going to have $10 for each speaker. So that's 10x. Okay, so that's your equation for expenses. There's your equation for revenue. So if I want to increase my profits, right, I need to know how many speakers I need to sell. But for my revenue to exceed my cost of production. So what I want to know here is, when is my profit going to exceed my expenses, all right? So hopefully you can find this out, figure out when your profit is going to exceed your expenses. All right, well, that's what I want you to do here at this point. When does my profit exceed my expenses? Take a stab at it. You should be able to figure it out. Just a little thought. Next, I want you to find the max revenue. On a certain route, an airline carries 8,000 passengers a month, each paying $50. A market survey indicates that for each $1 increase in ticket price, the airline will lose 100 passengers, all right? So I want you to write a function that gives the total revenue that the company brings in R in terms of X, the cost of the ticket, and Y, the number of passengers traveling per month. That's really simple, guys. You should be able to figure that one out very, very easily. It's easier than you think. And then write a function that gives Y, the number of passengers traveling in terms of X, the cost of the tickets. Use your function from part B to rewrite the revenue function R in terms of only X. And then, for what ticket price will the company get the maximum revenue? Explain your answer. My hint to you guys is that your equation that you get in part C should be a quadratic. I'm looking for a quadratic, okay? So after part B, when you rewrite the equation in terms of x, you should get a quadratic. And that's important because in part D, if you're looking for a maximum revenue, that should tell you that you're looking for something that's important, all right, on a quadratic. We kind of talked about these important points already. Can you figure out which important part of the parabola we're talking about here that we want to find if we're looking for a maximum revenue based on the shape of this curve? And that's it for today. So I hope you took time to write this down and get as far through this problem as you can. I expect everybody to be able to do A, and hopefully you can do B and C. All right? And we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night, guys.